My name is Alina, I'm 70 years old. If you had asked anyone in our town about Henry and me, they would have said we were the picture of stability. 50 years of marriage, one son. A home filled with family dinners, laughter, and years of shared memories. But what no one saw, what no one wanted to see, was the truth I carried alone for half a century. The day I realized I was never truly chosen was also the day he married someone else. It was our 50th wedding anniversary. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that Henry would finally do something special. We had never had a proper wedding. No dress, no guests, no vows. He used to say, weddings are a waste, what matters is staying together. And I believed him. I thought our quiet love was enough. I was wrong. That day, Henry wore the most beautiful suit I had ever seen him in. But it wasn't for me. He married someone else. Publicly, grandly, under the sun and the cheers of strangers, and not just strangers, our son Jacob was there too, celebrating. I watched from afar, hidden among trees like an outsider at my own life's finale. The woman Henry was holding so proudly, her name was Clara, a name I had only heard in whispers. I didn't know the full truth yet, but my soul already did. That wasn't just a friend, that was the woman he had loved all along. That night I sat in the living room, no lights, no dinner, just silence. The quiet before a storm that had been building for decades. Jacob walked in, flipped the switch, saw me in the dim glow, and frowned. Mom, what are you doing sitting here in the dark? It's creepy. I looked at my own son, my only child, and asked, where were you today? Henry walked in behind him, still in the same suit, the faintest trace of lipstick on his collar. He looked surprised to see me. Maybe he thought I wouldn't find out, maybe he didn't care. Jacob said, we just had errands, nothing big. I took out my phone, shaking, and pressed play. There it was, Henry at the altar kissing Clara. Our town clapping, my own son beaming with joy. My stomach turned. Henry's reaction wasn't guilt, it was anger. You were spying on me. He grabbed the phone and deleted the video. No apology, just a rehearsed excuse. Clara's sick. She has breast cancer. This was her last wish. It was just symbolic. I wanted to scream, to cry, but instead I breathed in and out, steady and calm. He called it symbolic. But the truth was, in 50 years of marriage, he had never once looked at me the way he looked at her. I realized in that moment I was never the woman he loved. I was the woman who stayed. And Jacob, my own son, looked at me and said, you're being petty, Mom, don't be jealous of a dying woman. I had never felt so invisible, so replaced. That night I packed a single suitcase. I left the divorce papers on the coffee table, and I walked out. No tears, no screaming, just silence. The silence of a woman who had given everything and had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I left the house I had called home for 40 years. Jacob saw me wheeling my suitcase to the door and scoffed, who's going to cook? Who's going to take care of Jacob? Not once did he ask how I was feeling. Not once did he ask why I was leaving. And I understood then I was not just leaving Henry. I was leaving a lifetime of being everyone's caretaker and no one's priority. I moved back to the old apartment that was still in my name. It was small, quiet, but for the first time in decades I could hear my own thoughts again. There were no footsteps pacing outside my room, no crying grandson. No Henry shouting over a sports game, just peace. The first night alone I couldn't sleep, not because I missed them, but because I didn't know what it felt like to belong to myself. Every hour of my life had been given away to a man, to a child, to a family that never really saw me. I sat by the window, tea in hand, and asked myself, what did I live for? I thought about how I met Henry. I was 20, he was 21. He was smart, polished, recently graduated. I was a working girl with no degree and tired eyes, but I studied every night just to keep up with his conversations, just to seem interesting. Just to be enough. He once told me he had a great love before me, a woman he never named. I didn't ask. I thought that loving someone meant accepting everything, even their past, even the pain they didn't let go of. So I spent years trying to make up for the love he lost. I took care of him when he was sick. I supported him when he had no job. I ironed his shirts, made his favorite meals, waited at the door when he was late. But he never really chose me. He settled, and I settled for being second. Over the decades, we became partners in routine, not in love. We raised Jacob, paid bills, hosted dinners. But I can't remember the last time he looked at me and saw a woman he desired. A woman he adored. And when Clara came back into his life, I saw it, the man I had never truly met. He became softer, more alive, more generous. For her, always for her, even Jacob admired her, treated her as if she were more graceful, more elegant, more wife-like than I ever was. And I realized I was invisible in my own family, but I didn't cry. Instead, I wrote a letter to myself. Dear Alina, you are not just a wife, not just a mother. You are a woman who once had dreams. You used to love books, music, dancing in the kitchen. You used to smile at sunsets. You forgot who you are, but she's still there. Find her. So I did. I joined a group tour to Europe, my first trip alone in decades. Italy, Greece, Spain, places I had only seen in pictures, places Henry never wanted to go. I walked ancient streets and tasted food I had never dared to order. I met women like me, older, wiser, full of stories, some divorced, some widowed, some simply tired of being needed but never loved, and none of us were bitter. We were alive. Every night we sat together and talked not about men, but about art, about oceans, about the peace of finally becoming our own person. I laughed so much I forgot what regret felt like. I posted pictures not to prove anything, just to remember, this is what freedom looked like. And that's when Henry started liking every photo, even left comments, glad you're happy, looks beautiful. I ignored them. He had made his choice, now he could live with it. But life, as always, had its own twists. I had just returned from Lisbon, my suitcase still resting in the hallway when I saw her, Clara, sitting at my favorite cafe where I had once cried into a lukewarm latte after the divorce. She stood the moment I walked in, dressed in soft pastels, hair done perfectly, her face as polished as always. You must be Alina, she said, as if we were strangers who hadn't shared the same man for half a century. I didn't respond. She smiled politely. You look better than he described. I raised an eyebrow. She laughed, a forced kind of laugh. Henry said you were always practical, never emotional. He admired that. There was a pause before she continued. You must wonder why I came back into his life. Well, we got married on your anniversary. I sat down not because I wanted answers, but because I wanted to see how far her performance would go. She leaned forward, voice softened. I had cancer, or at least I thought I did. The diagnosis was wrong, but before I knew, I reached out to Henry. He came running. Of course he did. She kept going, tone dreamy like it was some tragic romance novel. When I saw how much he still loved me, I asked for one thing, a wedding. A real one. I never got that from him before. I finally spoke, neither did I. She blinked. Oh, well, it's different, you see, we were soulmates. There it was. The word, the insult, soulmates. She sipped her tea as if she hadn't just reduced my 50 years of marriage into a placeholder. I didn't mean to hurt you, she added gently, but we only have one life. We should be with the one who makes our heart beat. I stood up. And does your heart beat when you're feeding his grandson, when you're cleaning the kitchen, or only when you're trying on a white dress at 70? Her smile faded. Live your romance, I said, but don't expect me to applaud a betrayal dressed in roses. I walked out calm, steady, but my peace didn't last long. That night Henry had a stroke. Jose called me sobbing. Mom, please come. He's not waking up. They don't know if he'll make it. I hesitated. After everything, after the wedding, the lies, the humiliation, could I still find it in me to care? My friends urged me, not out of sympathy for Henry, but for closure. Go, they said, not for him, for you. So I went. He looked so small in that hospital bed. The man who had once towered over my world, now surrounded by wires, unable to lift his hand. When he saw me, tears filled his eyes. I thought you wouldn't come, he whispered. I almost didn't. I'm sorry, Alina, for everything. He paused. I threw away 50 years for a memory. Silence. I didn't deserve your love, I know that now. I poured him a glass of water, but didn't help him drink. I wasn't there to comfort, I was there to speak my truth. You didn't just lose a wife, I said. You lost the only person who ever stood by you when no one else did, and even now I don't hate you. But I'll never forgive you either. He nodded weakly. Rebecca, he said, calling me by my middle name, his pet name for me in our early years. If there's another life, would you marry me again? I didn't even hesitate. No. I looked him in the eye. In my next life, I'll marry someone who chooses me the first time, not when it's too late. That was the last time I saw Henry. A few weeks after Henry's stroke, I booked a flight to Rome. It was something I had dreamed of since I was a girl, before marriage, before motherhood, before my name became wife and mom and nothing else. Now, at 70, I was finally chasing that dream, but not to escape, to begin. The air in Italy was warm with life. Each morning, I sat on a balcony with espresso in hand, letting the sun paint gold onto my face. I wore linen dresses, soft perfume, and a smile that finally felt real. I traveled light, no guilt, no resentment, no need to explain myself anymore. On the Amalfi Coast, I swam alone at dawn. In Florence, I stood in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus and cried, not because it was beautiful, but because for the first time I felt beautiful too. And then in Venice, I saw him again. Fernando, the widower I had danced with once in the quiet ballroom near my home. He had always said, "We are never too old for beginnings." He invited me for dinner by the canal. No expectations, just wine, conversation, and moonlight. "You look like someone who's finally living her story," he said. "I'm learning," I smiled. We talked for hours that night, not about the past, not about pain, but about books. About rivers, about the taste of tiramisu in winter, about how we both used to water plants in silence because we didn't know how to ask for help. There was no grand confession, no rush, no promises, just presence. That's how I knew it was real. Love this time felt like peace. Back home, I moved into a small white house with a garden of my own. My friends, those women I met during my first trip, visited every month. We drank tea under fairy lights, we played cards in the kitchen, and we laughed like girls too young to be grandmothers. We called it our second youth. When Jose finally wrote me a letter, his first sincere one in years, I read it carefully. "Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong about you, about everything. Dad's gone now. And there's not a day that passes when I don't regret how I treated you. Please come back." I folded the letter. I didn't cry, but I didn't go back either. I replied simply, "I have returned to myself. That is where I will stay." I often sit at my window now, watching the late afternoon light spill across my floor. Sometimes Fernando brings me flowers. Sometimes I go dancing alone. Sometimes I still wake up and feel the ghosts of the past knocking on the walls of my chest. But I no longer answer, because healing is not about forgetting. It's about remembering without pain. It's about looking back and saying, "I lived through that and still I chose joy." So if you're watching this, maybe with your heart a little cracked, wondering if you've wasted too much time, wondering if it's too late, let me tell you it's not. You are not too old. You are not too broken, and you are certainly not too late. Start again, even if your hands shake, even if your heart still whispers his name. Start anyway, because one day you'll stand in your own kitchen with sunlight on your face and you'll realize you were always the love of your life. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. What part of yourself are you ready to reclaim, or simply say, "I choose myself"? Because sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do.